So Michael Saylor, one of the biggest Bitcoin bulls of all time and the head of MicroStrategy, just went on CNBC and blew everybody's mind. Check it out.
You have been early and courageous, and you continue to double down. I want to talk about where you think Bitcoin is, but also want to talk about how you think about MicroStrategy and your company as a proxy for Bitcoin now that ETFs are available to the public.
Sure. Well, I think I'd start just with Bitcoin. Bitcoin is certainly at least digital gold. It's going to eat gold. It's got all of the great attributes of gold, and it's got none of the defects of gold. If you could teleport gold from New York to Tokyo in a few minutes, people would like it. And the price of Bitcoin is going to have to adjust up in order to meet that investor demand. So I think that's what's going to happen next to the asset class. MicroStrategy's got leverage. If we borrowed $800 million at 62 basis points, is there any company in the world that you wouldn't like to invest in that could borrow $1 billion at less than 1% interest to invest in your best idea? So we get that very intelligent leverage. It's non-recourse, it's unsecured, and then we buy Bitcoin with it. That leverage gives us volatility. It gives us performance. The performance gives us volatility. The volatility attracts capital. It's given our shareholders more Bitcoin per share this week than they had a few weeks ago. So it's very accretive for them. And it's pretty compelling for every investor. If you're Bitcoin curious right now and you want to buy Bitcoin at the all-time high, how do you get the upside in Bitcoin with downside protection? MicroStrategy sold $800 million in debt, and we have $13 billion of Bitcoin on the balance sheet. So we're giving you an over-collateralized loan and the upside. But if you're a Bitcoin maximalist and you love Bitcoin and you want to hold it forever, the ETFs charge you 25 basis points. MicroStrategy is accreting. We're giving you a yield against your shares in a tax-efficient fashion. So the maximalists like the equity. The hedgers, they kind of like the upside with downside protection. First, with regard to Bitcoin, no, there's no doubt in my mind Bitcoin was a better investment at 17,000 than it was at 65,000. I take the Warren Buffett view on this. Bitcoin's a superior investment to gold, equity, bonds, and real estate because it's digital. You can trade it 1 million times faster than conventional assets using a computer. It's available. Most other assets only trade less than 20% of the time. Bitcoin's trading 168 hours a week. We bought $800 million of Bitcoin, and a lot of it we bought over the weekend when all the conventional markets are closed. It's global. It's the most widely recognized and trusted investment asset in the world right now. It's ethical because it's the king of all commodities. There's no issuer. There's no company. There's no country controlling it. And fundamentally, it's useful. Thousands of market makers can trade it all the time. Millions of companies can trade it. Billions of people.
So Michael Saylor's redemption arc is absolutely beautiful. He went from being one of the most ridiculed people, partially by the same people who are now basically treating him as a messiah, to one of the people who are now viewed as one of the greatest visionaries in Bitcoin, the guy who saw it ahead of time, ahead of the curve. And that redemption arc, that change from the ridiculed clown to the messiah oracle, is kind of funny because it happened within a year and a half. I feel like I kind of can appreciate what Michael Saylor went through because of my Palantir journey, but in a way smaller scale. I'm not comparing myself to Michael Saylor and his multi-billion-dollar Bitcoin bet. But what I'm saying is, look, Michael Saylor actually made some beautiful points in this little short clip, which are very, very simple. Bitcoin is a competitor to gold. Gold is not as good as Bitcoin for a few reasons. Number one, Bitcoin is way easier to move around than actual gold. Well, it gets lost in translation a little bit because people tend to compare Bitcoin to currencies, and it's not as transactional as currencies. I get it. It's not money. You have to compare Bitcoin to gold. If you go head to head with gold, Bitcoin is digital. It's easier to move around. And Michael is also saying, look, it's also becoming part of mainstream finance. And he actually makes a very valid point here, which is this massive demand for Bitcoin, which means lots of volume, and it's virtually trading around the clock. So you can get in, get out. There's a lot of liquidity, a lot of volume, and there's nobody controlling it. So there's a lot of upside to Bitcoin kind of becoming the new gold standard. and replacing gold with this new Bitcoin digital currency, especially for this generation. I completely agree. Now, he was asked a very interesting follow-up question, which was essentially, look, Mike, there's a lot of ETFs coming up right now that are dealing with Bitcoin, and MicroStrategy is, essentially just a Bitcoin ETF right now. So what makes you better than these other ETFs? And what I think he said was very, very smart. He said, look, number one, we don't have any fees, which is a great point because retail investors chronically ignore fees in their profit calculation. Fees are key, and he doesn't have any. The other point he's making is saying, look, we're essentially buying Bitcoin on leverage. We're getting cheap loans, we're paying virtually no interest, and we're buying Bitcoin that's appreciating way higher than our leverage. So we're actually multiplying your Bitcoin return tenfold by doing this strategy, as long as Bitcoin keeps coming up. Obviously, there's a downside to this, but there's protections to that as well. What essentially he's saying here is that MicroStrategy is a fee-less ETF that's also a leveraged Bitcoin ETF, which means you kind of get to overextend yourself if you're actually a Bitcoin maximalist. Now, a lot of people have become Bitcoin maximalists since the price went up, but I don't think that's the right way to look at it. You have to look at it from a business perspective. Is this a better product compared to gold over the next 10 to 15 years? Not what the price will be in 2 months or 3 months or the next quarter, right? So if we look at Bitcoin as the new store of value for this upcoming generation, right? Supply is coming down, and it's coming down again in 40 days. It's going to halve. For those of you who are not familiar with this, every 4 years, the amount of Bitcoin that's being mined is halved. So basically what happens in 40 days is that miners will now get half as much Bitcoin for the same activities. Essentially, that shrinks the supply of Bitcoin and increases price. And while total supply discontinuation is still a long ways away, about 100 years, and by that time, I'm still going to be probably on YouTube making videos, but, that's still a long ways away. But still, nevertheless, the supply is actually shrinking every 4 years, which is a beautiful thing if you want to talk about macroeconomics. Supply comes down, price comes up, especially if we're actually heading into a low interest monetary policy environment, which is going to fuel a lot of these equity markets, but also Bitcoin. Now, look, as Bitcoin becomes safer, less volatile, and more mainstream, more retail investors and institutional investors will pile in, which would make it even safer and less volatile, essentially creating an endless feedback loop by creating more demand, less volatility, less risk, and higher prices. So Bitcoin is actually smart if you think about it. And that's why for the past 2 years, I've been telling you, look, I don't understand Bitcoin, but I see Wall Street money essentially piling in, which makes it bulletproof. Now, I don't know about any other coins. I'm just looking at Bitcoin right now. It's completely institutionalized. There's 10 ETFs already, and there's MicroStrategy. But I think MicroStrategy actually carries a bigger punch, and I'll explain why. Obviously, you heard from Mike about the fees. I totally agree. No fees is a huge benefit. But here's the thing. What Michael Saylor is doing with MicroStrategy is essentially my own system, which is DCA, dollar cost average at all times. Basically, he buys non-stop Bitcoin. Some of these other players are going to have to play the market, play the price, time the market, try to get in, get out. Michael Saylor buys at all times. And I'm sure, without asking him, that he buys more when the price comes down, which is essentially my system of dollar cost average and dollar cost average double when the price drops. That assures that Michael Saylor is going to have the lowest cost base of Bitcoin out of everybody else. Now, my friend Jesse Dow, who's one of the best upcoming young YouTubers in the finance space, who I'm hosting on my show live today at 4 p.m., he actually thinks that MicroStrategy can go all the way to $10,000 to $11,500, which essentially is a 10x from here. But before you go pile in completely into Bitcoin or MicroStrategy, look, I'm sure even if you ask Jesse, he's going to tell you the same thing. You can't pile into this thing hoping for the best, putting all your money immediately. You have to slowly get in, slowly dollar cost average. Look at it as a 10-year project, not as a 40-day project, not as a 1-quarter project, as a 10 to 15-year investment. When you zoom out, everything starts making sense. Now, Bitcoin is definitely taking over, but it is still a very volatile asset class, which means it can easily go back down to 20s, 30s. I don't know. It can also go up to 150. Who knows? But that volatility basically mandates you to handle with care. Essentially, dollar cost average over time. Don't go berserk buying Bitcoin all at once. Now, obviously, Bitcoin is on the run, and I think it can hit $100,000 by the end of the year. But on the same terms, it can also get 50 or 40. Who knows with Bitcoin? Now, if you want to get better at this whole thing of investing smart over long periods of time and creating wealth instead of chasing returns and timing the market, join our academy. Patreon.com/Tom Nash. We'll teach you the right mindset, how to look at good opportunities, how to identify crap, how to actually get in slow, how to do your modeling, and also join our Discord, discord.gg/Tom Nash, where we talk about all the stocks we're looking at right now, all the aspects of investing. It's essentially a support group. It's free to join. Join us, hang out with us. And if you haven't yet, claim your 1 week for free of Stock MVP. We just hit 5,000 new members on Stock MVP. We'll give you your own DCF model. We'll give you your own scorecard for companies. We just launched this feature. Absolutely insane things. Join for 1 week for free. Test it out. Let me know what you think. I'll see you in the next one.